Hello, my name's Fitz and I'm a bartender here at the Dead Canary in Cardiff, and today I'm going to be making some cocktails for you that are inspired by exhibits in museums all across Wales. The first cocktail we're going to be making today is inspired by the Derwent Bakehouse at St Fagans. This bakehouse was once used by the community to cook all sorts of things. Communal ovens were common across Wales and across the United Kingdom, and they were a place for people to come together, bake bread, bake all sorts of baked goods for the village or town that they were in. And I wanted to recreate the sort of smells, aromas and tastes of the bakehouse in full operation. So for that, we're going to take a cocktail shaker. For this cocktail, you're going to need some Welsh whiskey. I've gone with Penderyn Madeira finish because it does have a slightly more rounded and sort of softer finish to it than a lot of other whiskies, and it's going to complement the other ingredients in our cocktail very well. The next thing we're going to use is, this is Pedro Jimenez sherry. Pedro Jimenez sherry is rich in those raisiny and dried fruit flavours, and to improve this and to add to my cocktail, I've let a tea bag, just a regular plain old tea bag, soak in this overnight. And this is to recreate some of the sort of tea-soaked fruit flavours that you get from things like Bar o Brith. We're also going to need some oat milk or oat cream. I've bought some oat milk from the supermarket. The reason I'm using oat milk instead of dairy is it means that it's going to be approachable and easier for any of our guests to enjoy, even if they are dairy-free or vegan. And it also adds, I think, a slightly more sort of baked good characteristic to it than straight dairy does. If we were to use perhaps full fat cream, potentially I would add something else, but I believe oat cream does just as good a job, and it also adds something that I think dairy can't as well. The last ingredient we're going to use is something called orgeat. Orgeat is an almond-based syrup. You can see it in here. If you don't have orgeat at home, you can use a tiny drop of almond essence, or you could even use an amaretto as well in place of that. So first of all, we're going to add 40 millilitres of the Penderyn Madeira finish to our shaker. This is going to be full of that sort of treacle, toffee, vanilla sort of flavours. We're then going to add 15 mils of our tea-infused Pedro Jimenez sherry. I'm going to add 50 millilitres of oat milk. I'm then going to add 10 millilitres of orgeat. And last but not least, to make it a true Dead Canary cocktail, we're going to go a little bit fancy. To do that, I'm going to add some chocolate bitters to the mix as well. This is entirely optional, but we at the Dead Canary believe it adds a little bit more structure and a little bit more depth of flavour to the cocktail. Just add one drop. And then I'm going to give this cocktail a really, really good shake. By shaking the cocktail, it's going to help aerate all of the ingredients in there. It's also going to help chill our cocktail down and make it more approachable and easier to drink. I'm going to serve this cocktail up in a stemmed glass. I'm going to double strain it just to make sure that any ice chips are going to be caught in my strainer. And there we have it, the Derwent Bakehouse, inspired by the communal ovens of Wales and made to evoke the scents, aromas and tastes of baked goods from those ovens. Enjoy! Next up, we're going to make a cocktail based on the Graft Gardens in Swansea. One of the reasons I love this project so much is it teaches people in the community how to grow their own food. One of the other things that they do in the gardens as well is grow a lot of flowers and fruits and vegetables that encourage insects, wildlife and bees into the gardens. Bees are one of the most important creatures on the planet, and without bees we wouldn't be here, so anything that we can do to encourage bees in a local area is always welcomed. This cocktail is going to use honey, it's going to use Welsh gin, which uses a lot of botanicals that are found growing wild in Wales. It also uses Welsh cider as well to make something that's going to be floral, it's going to be approachable, and it's going to also use some of those herbs that you could grow in your garden quite easily. The first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of my Welsh honey. Now, this honey has set. If your honey sets, you can just pop it in a bath of warm water and it should be alright. What I'm doing with this honey is I'm actually going to dissolve it into my gin. So I've put about 2 teaspoons of honey just in the bottom of my glass. If there's a little bit on the side of the glass, don't worry about it. There we go. I'm then going to add my Welsh gin. We've gone for Aberfoyle's gin, and I'm going to use 50 millilitres of this in my cocktail. There we are. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to work the honey into the gin. So by being very careful with my teaspoon, we can just work this round so it incorporates into the drink. If we don't do this, you have clumps of honey floating around in the bottom of your cocktail and no one really wants that. So I'm just going to slowly but surely work all this round. Already, just from stirring this about, I can smell the fresh botanicals of the gin working in with the honey as well. One of the things that I think is amazing about honey is it takes on characteristics from the flowers that the bees have pollinated. So if you were to get honey from, say, Anglesey, you get a lot of really earthy, rich aromas, whereas if you've got honey from a hive that's been placed near an area with lots of flowers, it's going to be obviously higher in those floral and sweet notes. If you have bees that have been around heather, if you get some Scottish honey occasionally, you get that rich, like heathered, sort of earthy and herbal honey. I think it's really fascinating. So I've worked around my honey into the glass. As you can see here, it's all worked in. The next ingredient I'm going to take is a little bit of lime juice. Unfortunately, we can't grow these in Wales, at least not without a big greenhouse. So I got this from the supermarket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lime and I'm just going to cut it really carefully with a knife. There we go. The other side. And then, being very careful, I'm going to squeeze this half of lime into the glass. What I'm looking for here is just to add a slight bit of acidity. I am going to get acidity from the cider. I'm going to add a little bit later, so don't put too much in, but just a little squeeze of lime in there. The next thing we're going to add is a little bit of mint. Mint is something that can be grown really, really easily in your garden. Over lockdown, I grew loads of mint in my back garden, so it's pretty good for us, mojitos every day. But I'm going to add about 6 or 7 mint leaves to my glass. One thing we can do with our mint is, by giving it just a quick clap, it bruises the leaf ever so slightly and expresses all of those really sort of aromatic oils that are trapped in the leaf. I'm going to drop that in the glass. Wonderful. The next thing I'm going to do is going to add plenty of ice to my cocktail. The more ice that we add to our cocktail or to our glass means that your drink's going to stay colder for a lot longer, and it's not going to dilute as quickly as if you put just a few cubes in there. The next thing I'm going to add is some Welsh cider. And I'm going to give this just a quick stir, just to incorporate all of the ingredients. And then as garnish, I'm going to take one mint sprig, just pop that on the top. And I'm also going to add a bamboo straw. This is a straw that's going to be biodegradable, so it's good for those turtles. But also, it looks like garden cane. It looks like the mint's growing up the glass. So there we go. That's our Graft Garden Collins. Enjoy. For my final cocktail today, it's going to be inspired by the story of slate from a National Slate Museum. This cocktail is inspired by the Welsh slate industry. During the 1870s, the Dinorwig quarry employed 3,000 men, and Wales actually produced 4/5 of the slate that was used in the UK. Do you imagine during the Industrial Revolution, with the boom of factories and in cities like Manchester turning from towns into cities, obviously there's going to be a lot more terraced houses, going to be a lot more factories, a lot more things requiring slate, and Wales, the Wales countryside obviously being very, very rich in slate, it required a quarry with lots of people working very, very hard to produce what the country required. This cocktail is also going to be inspired by the taste of slate. When we're talking about cocktails, when we're talking about wine, often slate's used as a tasting note, especially with spirits and wines. I used to work in a wine bar, and if you were to take a lovely crisp Chardonnay, one of the tasting notes that you might find from that would be slate, and that means minerality. So that's going to be something that we're going to try and capture with our cocktail. This cocktail is a highball. A highball cocktail is very simple and very, very tasty. We're going to start with a tall glass. We're then going to fill our tall glass right the way to the top with ice. When we're adding ice to this, we want to add as much as possible so that drink stays nice and cold for the longest time. We're then going to add some Welsh whiskey. I'm using Penderyn Madeira finish again because it does have that rich caramel sort of note. I also think that it's very, very clean and very easy drinking with soda water. We're going to add 50 millilitres. The next thing that we're going to add is 20 millilitres of green tea syrup. This is where I've just oversteeped green tea, and then I've added equal parts sugar to that as well. The very last thing I'm going to add is some Welsh mineral water. Welsh water is incredibly pure. We drink it from the tap, it's delicious. I've just taken some Welsh water and I've carbonated it. This carbonation is going to allow those flavours to travel up the glass as well, and it's going to bring all that lovely mineral flavours from the cordial and from the whiskey up to the surface of the drink. Going to give this a really, really good stir. And last of all is garnish. I'm going to add just a tiny little mint sprig on the top. This mint sprig is going to add a nice little top note to the aroma of the drink. And it's also going to add a nice bit of contrast. This drink should look like and evoke images of the Welsh countryside and perhaps moss or plants next to slate. There we are, that's the Dinorwig Highball. Enjoy.